Thank you for inviting me today. Sorry I can't be with you. I live in Cornwall, so it's quite far away from you guys. And I've come today to share my son's story. My son William died of sepsis in 2014. I want just a little bit of a caveat at the beginning, because I'm not the only person, unfortunately, that's lost a child. So I won't be offended if people need to take a break or get out. It can, it can be quite triggering to listen to my story. And the reason that I've been invited here today is because one of the findings in William's death, sadly, there was lots of failings in William's care, but one of the findings was that there was just no shared records, and we had contact with 4 different stakeholders or agencies that were involved in William's care, and only one could see his records. And it played a significant role in the compromise that he received in his care. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. And if the chap that's sitting in front of the computer could confirm with a thumbs up that you can see my screen, that would be really, really good. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. Technology is wonderful, isn't it? So, so this is William, and he was. This was photo was taken when he was 10 months old, and he was born on my birthday, and he was what was known as an unremarkable baby. So I had no problems with my pregnancy, no problems with the birth, and he had no problems when he was born, and we went home. And we had a wonderful maternity leave, doing all the things that you would do with a newborn baby. And I started back at work in the September 2014, when William was about 9 months old. And up to this point, he had no illnesses, nothing really. He hadn't really mixed with other children or other people, so there wasn't that kind of germ sharing. But as soon as he started nursery, within a few days, he was snotty. He was, kids lick each other in places that they shouldn't, and they just share germs. So we kind of anticipated that as soon as he started nursery, that he would be, fall ill with some sort of childhood illnesses. And after about a few days or so, I noticed one morning when he was eating his breakfast that he looked like he was struggling to swallow. And, he couldn't tell me, "Mummy, my throat is sore," and I couldn't really look in his throat. He was, not even 1 at this stage. And so I said to Paul, his dad, "I'm just going to nip him off to the doctors." And we got to the doctors, and they examined him, and they looked in his throat, and they were surprised that he wasn't actually more poorly, because he had really bad tonsillitis. So they gave me some antibiotics, and I went home, and he was off nursery for about a week, I think, because he came out in scarlet fever after the tonsillitis. But he recovered really well. And William wasn't I know children of a younger age are less so, but he wasn't a woe is me type. He would just play until he couldn't, and he wasn't he wasn't really crying or anything like that. He was sort of okay with the illness. And he went back to nursery, and I suppose it must have been about 10 days after, so we're into October now, he started having a cough, and it's sort of what you would call a self-limiting cough. So he would sort of and then get on with it. It wasn't stopping him eating, it wasn't stopping him playing, it didn't keep him up at night. And it sort of went on a little bit after, about a week or so. And I said to Paul, "Have you noticed that William's got a cough?" And he said, "Yeah, I have." And I thought, well, I might just take him in, because it's been sort of about, over a week now. So I took him into the doctors, and they said his chest is clear, ears are clear, throat's clear, everything's fine. You're a first-time mum. You're bound to be worried. So I thought, right, okay. And that's actually what I thought was going to happen. I didn't anticipate anything different. After about a week or so, the cough hadn't gone away, and it was now worse. So he was coughing more frequently and for longer periods of time. And it was sort of waking him up at night a little bit. So I took him back to the doctors again. Now, we live in fairly rural Cornwall, and we see the same doctor every time, which most people would feel is a blessing. But unfortunately for us, it wasn't. And So we saw the same doctor, and he examined his chest, examined his ears, his throat, you know, and he just said he's completely fine. He's got no temperatures. His chest is clear. This is just a viral cough. We're heading into winter. He's in nursery. So I thought, right, okay. And, you know, I wasn't particularly worried. William wasn't really ill with it, if that makes sense. And so we're into November now, and I can remember we celebrated his first birthday and my birthday, and we had some food at a pub, and I said to Paul, he looks like he's lost a bit of weight, because he was going round and round a circle of this table, pulling himself up. He'd just taken his first steps. And he said he has lost a bit of weight, hasn't he? The very next morning, I gave him his breakfast, his toast, and he coughed so much he was sick. And it wasn't like a tummy bug sick. It was, he'd literally just eaten his toast and he coughed so much he brought it up. And I said to Paul, it's not right. That shouldn't be happening. So I took him back to the doctors, and I don't know why, but I asked to see a different doctor. And the first thing she said to me when I walked in was, oh, I can see from the previous doctor's notes that this is a viral cough. So in this instance, when she had access to his records, she read them, but there was sort of some unconscious bias. And then she examined him, and I can recall her words as clear as day. And she said, there are some crackles on his chest, but little chests are very difficult to listen to because the sounds reverberate off of the upper respiratory tract. So I said, do you think he should have some antibiotics now? This is sort of 5-6 weeks into this cough, and it's not gone away. It's just getting worse. And now he's been sick. And she said, because I said about the weight, and she said, well, if he's becoming more active, he's likely to sort of, you know, start to lose some of that chubby baby fat. So I thought, right, okay. And she said, I recognise that you have this really strong family history of asthma. I've got brittle asthma. My dad has lung cancer. We dreadful lungs in the family. So she said, I'll give you a Ventolin inhaler. So if you give this to him before he eats and before he sleeps, that will hopefully open up the airways, and he won't, you know, suffer from those coughing fits as much. So I thought, right, okay, that's okay. So we went home and we let him play with the little aero chamber with the mask on the end. And so William was a really placid baby. My other son, Arthur, his younger brother, is quite feral. He won't let you brush his hair, doesn't want to wash his hair, doesn't want you to, you know, do any of those things. Whereas William was really calm. And so he played with this, and he put it on his face, and he took it really well, as any other child would. But it didn't really make a difference. And I remember picking him up from nursery on the Thursday, the 11th of December, and I took him home, and we had spaghetti bolognese, and he was covered in it. So I gave him a bath, and we built a den. And that was the last time I ever really heard him belly laugh. And that night I woke up to him crying, and I went in, and he was cutting 5 teeth at the time. His cheeks were bright red, his fists were going in his mouth, and he was dribbling. And so I gave him some Calpol, and I cuddled him, and he went back to sleep. And I got up on the Friday morning and started doing what you usually do in the morning, breakfast and things. And William didn't really want his breakfast. I couldn't tempt him with any strawberries or blueberries or any of the things that he really loved. And so I said to Paul, oh, I might keep him off nursery today. And when I said that word nursery, he sort of perked up and he crawled towards the front door, which is it's just his little thing that he did. And he just got his little shoes on the way. And so I said, well, I'll take him in. If he's just, you know, he's just teething, they can give him some Calpol, you know, if he starts to feel uncomfortable. So I took him in and said he'd probably be quite hungry soon. And I got a phone call about 11 o'clock to say that he was quite uncomfortable with his teeth. So they'd given him some more Calpol, and they'd noticed that he was quite warm. And his temperature was 37.8. So they said, we've put him down for a nap because he's really tired. So I said, right, okay, as soon as he wakes up, let me know and I'll come in and get him. I wasn't far from nursery. I got another phone call about 11:30 to say that he'd not woken up, but they'd taken his temperature again, and it was now 38.4. So I said, right, okay, I'm on my way. I'm going to come in and get him. So on the way on the car phone, I rang the doctors, and I said, my son needs to be seen. He's really not, he's not well. And they said, we haven't got any appointments. This is Friday, the 12th of December. It's icy, it's cold. It was a really horrible winter full of flus, you know. And they said, we haven't got any appointments. I said, well, he really needs to be seen. I said, can I take him up to the, you know, the hospital? And they said no. And I didn't know at the time, they were on black alert. Unless you had arterial spray, you were not coming through the front door. And I said, but I really need him to be seen. So I sort of reiterated this over and over. And she said, right, okay, look, come and sit at the end of the day and we'll get you in with the duty doctor. So that's what I did. So we took this photo of him at home, and you can see he's really unhappy. His lips are bright pink. He's snotty. He's not his happy self. By the time we got into the doctor's was 1:45 or 6:20, and his temperature was 40.1, and he was combative. And he did not want to be touched. He did not want to be held. He did not want to be examined. And it was really unlike William. And I said, this isn't right. Something's not right. This isn't him, his normal self. And I couldn't put my finger on it, you know. And I calmed him down, and the doctor managed to examine him. And when he was calm, and he said his chest is clear, his ears are clear, his throat is clear. Mum, I know you're worried. You're a first-time mum. This is just a viral cough, probably coupled with a teething. He's just feeling really sorry for himself. So I thought, right, okay. And he just said, get on top of the temperature and then he'll start to feel better. So as we walked out the door, I can remember going back in, and I remember saying to him, when should I take him in? And he said, don't worry, it's nothing grisly. So we weren't really told any information about what worse looks like. So we went home and we got supplies and of Calpol and Nurofen and things. And then I put him to bed. And over the course of that night, I had to go into him a couple of times, but his temperature wasn't getting as high as it had previously. So I thought, oh, we're starting to break the temperature. That's good. He'll start to feel better. As Saturday wore on and his temperature was coming down, he just seemed so much worse. And he just wouldn't tolerate clothes on him. The vest is all I could really get on him. And we had a leather sofa, so I put the quilt on there because I didn't want him to get cold. But he felt quite cold to touch. Like his hands and his legs were cold. And I said to Paul, he just looks dreadful. He looks so pale. He's really not right. So I rang 111. Paul said, my God, they're going to think you're neurotic. And I was like, but he's not right. And they asked me to take his temperature during 3 times during this phone call, and it was 35.4. And they said, that's good. You've got his temperature down. I said, but he's so much worse. I said, he's really pale. And they said, well, if he's got a virus, he's likely to be sort of off colour. And I said, he feels quite cold. And they said, well, if he won't have any clothes on him, he's going to feel cold. So I thought, right, okay. And I said, he's not eaten since Thursday. And every time I'm giving him sort of like trying to give him water or milk, he's just bringing it back up, and it's green and it's horrible. And they said, well, he's just likely just got a virus. And I said, he's not been to the toilet since Thursday and he's not had any wet nappies. And they said, if he's not eating and drinking, he's not going to have any wet nappies. So I said, and they played this phone call out at the inquest, and you could hear this funny high-pitched cry of him in the background. And I said about it, I didn't use those right words, but I said he's sort of whining. And they said, well, he's going to be whinging if he's not feeling very well. So they said, this is a non-urgent 6-hour callback. So I thought, right, okay. This is the last photo that I have of me and my son alive. You can see from his lips here, they're completely devoid of colour. He was so drowsy. It got to about 7 o'clock and I put him to bed, and I had to put his little arm around his reindeer because he just couldn't hold it up. And I don't know if any of you have got children, but when you have children, you put them to bed and you stealth out of the room so as not to wake them up, you know. But I stood at the end of his cot and I looked at him and I thought, you're not right. Something's not right. And I went downstairs and I rang 111 back and I said, I'd really like to speak to a doctor, please. So I had to wait. I was patched through to a little local sort of cottage hospital. And fairly near the beginning of the phone call, he expressed how busy his waiting room was and how busy it was that night. And I thought, crikey, I better get on with it, you know. And I said they had had this really high temperature yesterday, and now it was sort of hovering around 35. And he said, that's good, you've got on top of the temperature. And I said that he was sort of felt quite cold and shivery. And he said, well, if he doesn't want to be dressed or have his little sleeping bag on him, he's likely to feel a bit cooler. And I said that he'd not had any wet nappies, and he reiterated the same, that if he's not eating and drinking, he's not going to be going to the toilet. And I don't know why they played this phone call out at the inquest as well. And I don't know why I said it, but subconsciously something must have been going through my head, because I said in this tone, in your professional opinion, what do you think I should do? Because listening to that phone call back, I was leading all the questions. He was very reactive, not proactive. You know, if he'd have said, my goodness, get him straight in here, I would have panicked, but my son might be alive. And he said the best place for him is in bed, keep up the Calpol if he's uncomfortable, fluids. He'll be right as ninepence in the morning. And I said, what happens if he gets worse? Can I bring him in? And they said, no, you have to go through 111 to get an appointment. So I thought, right, okay. Now I was faffing. We were due to go to Spain on the Tuesday to spend Christmas and New Year with my family. Paul had organised for us to get married on the Monday as a surprise. And I had gone into full faff mode. I was packing and washing and cleaning, you know, you do. And I checked on him about 11 when I went to bed, and he was sort of sleeping. And then I went in at about 2 and he was sort of snoring soundly. And then about 5:30, I heard some rustling, and I looked, we've got one of those little baby spine monitors, and I could see he was taking a drink from his sippy cup. And I thought, oh, that's good, he's thirsty, you know, he's going to want some porridge in a minute. And I went back to sleep, and I woke up just after 8, and I didn't have my glasses on, and went into William's room, and we got a blackout blind, so I couldn't see anything. And when I opened the door, I could smell that he'd been to the toilet, and I thought, that's really odd. He doesn't, you know, he doesn't do that in the night anymore. And I was talking to him, and I was saying, William, William, and he just wasn't saying anything. And I went over to his cot, and I stroked his cheek, and it was warm, but he didn't move. And I knelt down and I put my arm through the bar of the cot, and I stroked his arm, and it was quite cold, and he didn't stir. And I stroked his side, and he was stiff. And I shot up, and I opened the blind, and I could see that he was dead. His eyes had fallen open, and he was staring straight through me. And I just started screaming. I started screaming to Paul, it's William, he's dead, he's not breathing. And I ran into the bedroom to get the phone to ring 999. And I went back into the bedroom after opening the front door for the paramedics, and Paul had lifted William out of the cot, and he stayed in the position he'd died in because he was in rigor. And I started CPR, and I was focusing on the little digital display on the phone, and I can just remember her going, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, and I couldn't open his mouth to give him rescue breaths because he was in rigor. After 3 minutes and 44 seconds, the paramedics come thundering up the stairs. We literally lived only around the corner from the ambulance station, and it was Sunday morning, and it was quiet. After 7 minutes of working on him, they turned to me and said, I'm sorry, my love, but he's gone. And I just started screaming. And then they held me, and I stopped, and I laid on my bed, on his bedroom floor, with my cheek on his, and I begged him to wake up, knowing that he never would. And we were conveyed to hospital, where they took this photo. This is our reality. This is the reality of not thinking sepsis. This is the reality of all of the failings in William's care. We're not just a number. We're not just statistics. We're people. We're a family. This was the last and only photo I've got of William. I got to hold him 15 more times after this photo was taken. I'll just move that on. I got to hold him 15 more times after that photo was taken, and he was taken up to Birmingham for a post-mortem. My parents were flying over from Spain when we should have been driving over there. And on Christmas Eve, I got a phone call from the coroner who said, "We've got William's body back. You can have him for Christmas." And then she said, "Did William have a cough?" And I laughed like a nervous laugh. I was like, yeah, he'd had a cough for ages, you know. I said, "We're taking him to the doctors sort of six times, 5-6 times." I said, how do you know?" And she said, "Well, he had pneumonia." I said, "What do you mean he had pneumonia?" I said, "He'd been taken to the doctor. I took him to the doctor 36 hours before he died." She said he had a collapsed lung, and he had a pleural effusion where there was 200 mils of viscous fluid in his left lung cavity. I actually spoke to the medical examiner that did William's post-mortem because I had to understand exactly what had happened to him. And they said that the viscosity of that fluid had been there for about 7 to 10 days. And I said, "But the doctor said his chest was clear." And he said, "No, there was his chest, there would have been no air movement in his chest. And the right-hand side would have been very dull." Then he said he had heavy inner and outer ear infection. And I said, "Well, do you use the same thingy to put in his ear that you used?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "But the doctor said his ears were clear." Then he said he died of sepsis. And I thought, bloody hell, what is that? That must be so rare. And I Googled it like you would. And every single symptom I started ticking off: not wetting his nappies, cold extremities, funny cry, not eating, not drinking, vomiting. I checked all over him for that red, you know, the meningitis rash. I checked it behind his ears, in between his toes, everywhere, because I didn't want to miss the rash, because everyone knew about the rash. He didn't have a rash. And so we had to go through what I can only explain as the most horrendous and soul-destroying protracted battle with the NHS to get answers. Because when we started asking questions, they shut the doors, and they would give me the least amount of information to try and get me to go away. And I can remember at a later stage, when I joined the CCG, I sat on the CCG on the board a few years later, and they said in a nice way that I was a thorn in the side of the CCG. And I said, "I'm good, I'm glad." And I can remember Jeremy Hunt calling me a constructive nuisance. But I didn't want to be those things. I just wanted answers. I didn't want a legal battle. I didn't want to have to endure having to read his post-mortem over and over, and the questions that we went through, the inquest we had to go through. And William's report found 16 failings in his care and 4 missed opportunities to save his life. Ultimately, he'd had a bacterial chest infection, and if he'd been prescribed antibiotics, he'd likely have not developed pneumonia. And even if he had, because as we know, people do still develop pneumonia, he'd have been on the radar, a different course of antibiotics, a hospital admission, a chest x-ray. And these were the RCA conclusions in his care. And there was quite a lot, and it's very wordy. But one of them was the shared patient records nationally and record keeping omissions. There was only one doctor that could see William's records, and that was the doctor we took him to on the Friday night. And he didn't record any observations in his record. He only noted he had a very high temperature. 111 couldn't access his records. The out of hours doctor couldn't access his records. 999 couldn't access his records. And the onus was on me every single time to say and do the right thing, to use the right language, to try and prompt. You know, if I had said that he had a significant drop in temperature, if I had said his skin was mottled, if they had recognised that sepsis was, well, it is now part of the pathway for 111 and 999. But it wasn't at the time. It was too crude to recognise that deteriorating paediatric patient. And the issue is that I was a parent who had been awake for 2 days, and I had a poorly child who I was worried about. I was pulling my hair out. And the onus was always on me to say and do the right things. There was no proactive approach from the doctor. I'll stop sharing now. And this is why it's so important that you are doing what you are doing. Because if the out of hours doctor could have seen the number of times that we had visited the doctor, if he had seen the history of that cough, William might be alive. And we weren't listened to. You know, I didn't maybe say or do the right things, but I knew he wasn't right. And I was saying he's just not right. And he was sent home. And that's where he died. And so today I know that, you know, William died 9 years ago. He'd be 10 next month. And I think to myself, how much has changed in those 9 years. The awareness around sepsis has come on significantly, and I've worked really hard to try and improve that in the community and within the healthcare setting. But you guys are the example of one of the findings in William's care, in that shared records is so important, and keeping the patient at the centre of everything that you do, because it will save lives, and it could have saved William's life. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for inviting me here today to talk to you. I'm sorry if I've upset you. That's 10 times what I tend to do. And I'm just going to finish there, and I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. But thank you.